You have found us again. It's the Smart Driving Cars podcast. Thank you for taking time with us. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. Technical support is provided by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to safe and high-quality mobility for all. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alan Kornhauser. Hi, Alan.
Hey, good afternoon, Fred.
Good afternoon, and we're happy to have with us once again from Sweden, automotive consultant and publisher of The Dispatcher, Michael Sena. Good to see you, Michael.
Good evening to you both.
We are getting the jump on the July edition of The Dispatcher, where the lead article is focused on the Princeton Smart Driving Cars Summit, which took place earlier this month. And Michael, you're really taking a look at the importance of what took place and the previous summits that led up to it.
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there. And that's part of the reason why this write-up of the summit doesn't include all of the detail which I've had in previous issues when we have had the summit, where I've reported on each one of the sessions, panels that we've had. I'm sure, based on all of the information that I've gotten from Alan and from others who participated in the summit, it was all there. It all came together. But what I've tried to do in this issue of the Dispatcher is to put it all in perspective. I mean, this is the fifth summit. There are four before, and all of those were sort of a preamble. They were leading up to what was supposed to happen and what, from all accounts, actually did happen. This summit was a kickoff to what will be a demonstration of all the ideas that have been discussed and kicked about and thought about in between the summits for providing mobility to people who really need a ride. So for those who were there and for many of those who weren't able to be there, I've put into the Dispatcher what led up to this particular summit, how it all came together, and what it means going forward.
And you were able to see some of it, I think, streaming a few of the sessions.
Yes,
right?
yes, I was able to be there on my Friday morning, but when the panel discussions were just beginning to kick off. It looked like the previous summits, although one of the things that I've described in the Dispatcher is that initially it was going to be in Trenton. All of the events were going to be in Trenton, and it was going to be an event, but things didn't exactly work out that way. And I think it's important that we understand why and what that means for how this is going to be developing over the course of hopefully the next 2 years. Alan might want to jump in here and comment on the events that led up to the summit. It was delayed by a month, which is the reason that I wasn't able to be there, because I had made plans. I hadn't been in the States for 3 years, and it was a matter of putting family and mostly family and friends and organizing things to be there. And then, not at the last moment, but at the last moment for me, we had to change the date from the beginning of May to the beginning of June, which meant that I wasn't able to go back there at 1 month later. But
yes, we did have to delay it. It was unfortunately we delayed it. Actually, we delayed it. Originally, it was scheduled to be in November of the previous year, and it's a good thing we didn't do it then, because we really weren't ready. In May, it would have been good, but as it turned out, May, again, with things hanging around with from the pandemic and so on, and the university, really university activities, university still trying to get to graduation. And actually, we had 2 graduations this year. We had graduation for the class of 2020, as well as graduation 5 days later for the class of 2022, because of course we weren't able to have graduation for the class of 2020. And so that, with reunions, a whole bunch of other things, I mean, it was going to be a challenge. And as it turned out, I think all for the better, because except for missing Michael, and that was a big miss, essentially everybody else showed up, came in, participated, and it's the kind of participation, instead of people getting up there and giving sort of what might be called a stump speech. I mean, people were engaged and engaged really to try to get to a point in which one is delivering mobility to society with this technology. And I think that is the fundamental difference here. You know, we've spent all this time up to this point with this technology doing testing and trying to get it someplace. And and yes, we have made vehicles safer, probably, that we drive, and we have delivered comfort and convenience, and beginning to deliver comfort and convenience. But in terms of delivering mobility to people, and especially mobility to people who unfortunately don't have a great opportunity for mobility. This is not, you know, the 15th different way that you can get from A to B, and geez, let me see which one suits me the best today. This is really an attempt to provide mobility to people that you know, really don't have it. And this is becoming, it seems to be becoming, an important thing that you know, once one deals with the equity piece of this thing. And I think what we've finally gotten out there to a discussion stage is looking at what has existed up to now, an enormous disparity between the haves and have-nots in the mobility space. And the haves and have-nots are basically those that that have access for all the various reasons they may have access, to be able to do mobility for themselves and deliver it for themselves. And my goodness, the opportunities there are, you know, are essentially ubiquitous. Anytime, any place, anywhere, blah, 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 boom, you go. As opposed to those that don't have that opportunity to deliver it for themselves, to themselves, and need to have someone else deliver it for them. And when one looks at the mobility opportunities that are provided for them, then it really is a stark difference. And I think that that's what the equity issue is coming down to, is trying to say, oh my goodness, if one has now this gift of this technology, that basically it's just sitting around waiting to be used, and all of a sudden that opportunity to have mobility essentially at any time, maybe not anywhere yet, but maybe to a number of places, becomes an opportunity to put out there without going bankrupt trying to do it. It's not that people haven't wanted to do that. It's just that people haven't been able to afford to do that, because it turns out in the past, if you had to have a person standing by along with the technology, the wheels, the Roman wheels, to be able to get you to where you want to go, unfortunately, that person standing by is very challenging. And it was great to have Catherine Freud again at the summit, because Catherine just kind of brings this whole thing out when, you know, her efforts for however long she's been at it, 20 more years, trying to get volunteers to provide affordable mobility to seniors. Here she's had, she hasn't had the opportunity to have a technology do it. She needed a volunteer. Why? Because the volunteer, by definition, does it close to for free.
Yeah.
And therefore it makes it affordable and doable. But the efforts one needs to make to be able to attract volunteers to do this, thank goodness we have some, but that is a very limited supply. All of a sudden you can go and maybe with a technology, this thing, and it's your volunteer.
Yeah.
And
What
it's
what
you know
what I found in the previous summits leading up to this, someone would make a speech about autonomous vehicles, which is a difficult word in itself, and people would focus on the technology. And so the discussions might start out with, why are we doing this? But it always seemed to end up with a discussion around, how is it going to be done? How are we going to get these cars to work? And the people who were doing it, like the Waymos and Argos and Cruises, didn't show up. They weren't there to discuss their technology because, well, they had other things to do. They were doing their prototypes and they were doing their tests, and they were doing them in areas where they could show the technology without having to discuss why they were putting a lot of money, a lot of resources into this. The issue never focused on what is the benefit to society for doing something like this. Do we really need to have cars that drive themselves when we're doing a pretty decent job especially with the technology that's going into the vehicles today? We're doing a pretty decent job of getting cars on the road and driving cars and doing everything that we need to do, as long as we can afford it. But I think starting with the last summit, which ran over a period of 4 months or 5 months, we were able to get into the why in almost every single one of the panel discussions. Even in those discussions where we discussed, who will build it and how will they be distributed, and all of those discussions, what's the insurance going to be like, and so on. We always came back to the primary issue for smart driving cars, which was, these cars need to do something that will benefit society. And that also gets to the issue of why the pilot project is being done in Trenton, a city of almost 90,000 people, but it was 128,000 people at one point in the 50s. Why it's being done there and not being done in San Francisco or New York City or Berlin or London or Paris or Rome, or one of these cities where there are plenty of people around who can afford to get in a taxi and get to work or go wherever they want to go all the time and not worry about a car. They have plenty of money to put a car into a garage and leave it there and get around with taxis or Uber, whatever. And what I think was clear that came out in this summit and the discussions that were held, even though I wasn't there, I saw what was being discussed and who was participating. They focused on the benefit to society for having vehicles that could be driven to provide mobility for people to get to work, to get to the hospitals, to get to places where they could afford to buy the goods that they need, in a community where the availability of transport is not at the highest level, and the availability or the ability to have their personal vehicle to be able to drive cars is also low because of the economic situation. And that was what came through And what I've tried to put into context here, that's what came through in the summit, and it sets the stage, and I think in a very, very good way, for what's going to happen now. What will be the next steps, the commitments that you've gotten from the city, from the state, and as well as from the federal government, the Department of Transportation, to be able to show these companies like Waymo and Cruise and their owners, GM and Amazon and others, SoftBank, that this is where things should be doing. This is where we should be spending our time and our effort and our money, not giving rides to people in places where they can afford to have their own cars or 2 cars or 3 cars, and the kids at 16 years old can drive themselves to school. This is a place where people need to have a ride. And the solution that's being provided is a way of getting the major cost out of the equation to be able to put 4 wheels under 1, 2, 4, or 8 people to get them to where they need to go. And I think that this is a really major step, and it should be recognized as a major step.
Well, thank you for saying that, Michael, because that's really what it is, and I think the in addition to having the mayor, governor, commissioner, and so on, the leaders, so-called leaders of the community on board, it turns out that the community's on board. Mm-hmm. I mean, the support from the commissioner of education, the principal of the high school. I mean, you know, how often do you hear some principal tell you that truancy is directly proportional to how far away the kid lives from the school? And probably most schools know that. And
sure.
and the way, and you know, and in places, you know, we go through an enormous amount of work to provide a school bus transportation to kids, and it's, you know, no wonder nobody ever takes a bus after they live through a school bus transportation system. It you know, they're on there a lot, and this is a way to get, you know, just do simple things, get kids to school, get kids across the street. We talked about, we discussed, we were hoping to have Walmart here, but it doesn't matter whether it's Walmart or Target or, you know, one of these stores to get people to a Walmart. I mean, yeah. You know, if you don't have a car, you don't get to a Walmart. I mean, if you look at where some Walmarts do have bus service, anybody ever look at what the disutility is of traveling by bus to and from a Walmart versus the disutility of taking your car? If you happen to have one, oh my goodness, it's not even close.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the comments that I unfortunately made repeatedly in the thing, you know, some of us who do transportation, we have all these mode split models, you know, in which we say, oh, well, somebody's going to take this way to go there because of some disutility function that has all kinds of attributes to it. You know, every mode split model, basically, in trying to determine whether you take a car or you don't take a car, are a function of whether or not you have a car.
Exactly.
You know, it has nothing to do with the attribute. You don't have a car, you don't get there. Okay? Yeah. You have a car, now we can talk about whether or not you take the freeway, whatever, and all that kind of stuff. You don't have a car, you don't get there. I mean, it's like, it's the tale of two cities that's involved in that story is just phenomenal. And we've been living with this, you know, thing forever. And, you know, some people say, oh, yes, take a bus because it's gonna free up the freeway. The reason people take buses is they don't have cars or they don't go. You know, I mean, it's, and I don't know, we brought it out, and the beauty of the technology is that, geez, it might be able to do it. And what was really nice is, of course, May Mobility brought a vehicle. I mean, New Jersey is a heck of a place to do this because New Jersey has not been in this business. Okay, I think as I was up to this summit, I think there have been 4 so-called autonomous vehicles ever in New Jersey. 2 of them were my DARPA challenges, which they sort of worked, but certainly didn't do it. And then there was an Ollie, and then NVIDIA has been doing tests in New Jersey with their stack. But otherwise, and people were actually given rides with an attendant in a autonomous vehicle on a public street in New Jersey. I don't think it ever happened before. So, in terms of New Jersey, but it wasn't about the technology. I mean, I think that the assumption going into this summit, the assumption in the summit is that in an operational design domain, which is where and when this thing is going to offer mobility, it's a thing, it works. Okay, so it wasn't on whether or not it works. It's the why, to do what, for whom, how, and what operational level of service characteristics to do it, as opposed to worrying about whether or not you have high definition maps, LiDARs, SMIDARs. I mean, we talked a little bit about those things, but that's not the issue.
No,
Right.
It's not the issue.
Right, and we heard directly from people during the summit, especially the first day at Donnelly Homes. What does this mean to you? Well, I can get to the doctor. What is it, or I can get to my friend's house. That's what it means. It has nothing to do with the technology. It's getting from here to there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And, and of course, they're a little enamored and they look at it and so on as you would look at something else, but that's not it. This is very, very simple thing, just wanting to be able to get there when I want to get there. Otherwise, guess what I have to do? I have to look up a schedule. I have to find which bus goes there. I have to do all this stuff, and I better have all those things like correlate themselves. So the amount of planning and focus. Whereas I don't know. I guess I'm spoiled. I decide I want to go something. I go.
Off you go.
I am so darn fortunate. So darn fortunate. So darn fortunate. And and we have the opportunity with this to have more people also be equally fortunate, maybe not equally fortunate, but certainly a heck of a lot closer fortunate. And somebody may be able to do it and be a reputable company with shareholders that are happy with the operation of the company, just like, I guess, Coca-Cola is happy to make Coca-Cola that we consume.
And Michael,
Yes.
you ended your article by saying the real work starts now.
Yeah, the real work is well, it's already begun.
But we got to do it.
It's already begun. The first step, of course, is to be able to get the money to provide the cars, to pay for the attendants, to be able to put the kiosks in place. And everything else around it, insurance, the whole package. And Alan has been working with his group for quite some time now, putting a budget together. But it's getting the seed money to put into this to get things started. But the support is all there. So what are the chances that this is going to start happening, Alan?
Well, I mean, let me just add a little bit to that. To me, the fundamentals of this business, I call it a lemonade stand. It's just like if you're starting a lemonade stand business, you want to produce units of lemonade to consume, and and the thing that you're producing here is mobility. That's the unit. And to me, the beauty about this system is that as it grows, the cost of providing a unit, a glass of lemonade, a unit of mobility goes down. And the quality of the lemonade, maybe the sugar content improves is even better. The network effects of having it bigger, the more places you can go, the more ride sharing you can do, the more environmental sustainability, all that stuff gets better. Oh my goodness. I mean, that's the fundamentals of a successful business. What you're producing gets better and cheaper as it grows. That's why people invest in things. And
Well,
this thing is to me, and so it should be able to do this if we can get it started.
Yeah, and that the seed money right now, the seed money needs to come from somewhere. It's either going to come from a wealthy private person, or it's going to come from the federal government. It's going to most likely Department of Transportation, hopefully, but there needs to be an investment made by someone to get, to put things in place.
Like any venture entity, that you follow the J curve. That's why you take investment, is because in the beginning it's tough to get productivity out of the thing. So you need that to then get it. And as that becomes better and feeds on itself, you fundamental J curve. Now, whether it comes from philanthropy or whether it comes from all the people that already do the venture in there and so on, or the government, or the combinations,
one
very
of the
much
things,
an upfront cost.
One of the things that there are a lot of people who don't believe in this whole concept. They think that driverless cars are going to be for rich people, and they're going to chauffeured without a chauffeur. So you have a chauffeured car without a chauffeur, so you have it less expensive, and you get to do what you did when you were a kid, be chauffeured around by your parents. That's where they think the money is. Fine. Yeah. There may be a business in that. Go off and do it. I think there are a lot of individuals on the other side of the spectrum who may believe that this is a band-aid. It's not really solving the problem, because if everybody had a really good job and could earn a lot of money, they could buy their own cars or whatever they needed to do, and they could get to wherever they wanted to go. They're missing a huge point. Not everybody can work. Not everybody can buy a car. Not everybody can, even if they had the money, not everybody can drive a car. I have people in my family who will not drive a car, very smart people, both here and in the United States. And
they're 15-year-olds.
And they're, 15-year-olds.
They're not allowed to drive. There are entities that are not allowed to drive.
I don't want to go to 15-year-olds.
I know you don't, but
there are people who need to make a living, to be able to support themselves. 15-year-olds have parents, and the parents need to be able to do what they need to do to be able to get to their kids to wherever the kids need to go. So I appreciate the fact that there are kids that need to go to school, and getting there is a problem. But if our schools were, I don't want to go there, but I will. If we didn't build regional schools, or if we didn't have to build regional schools because we couldn't afford to have public schools close to everybody, like I had when I was growing up, and you had when you were growing up, I never got on a bus. I walked to school, even if when I had to go to high school, it was 2 miles away. I walked to school. But
mine was 22 miles uphill in the snow.
Yeah, that's another issue. There are people who don't believe there's a business to be made in this. And I think what this pilot project has as one of the objectives is to show how it can be made as a business. Mm-hmm. So there are a number of objectives that need to be, that are part of this. We don't have you don't have all the answers right now. We've got a lot of questions, and there are a lot of questions that people are asking. And what I'm saying here is that this is an opportunity to show that it solves a problem that needs to be solved, and it's potentially, and we'll see, potentially a business that can be self-sustaining and provide benefits to society. It would be nice if we didn't have to do this. It would be terrific if everybody, some people say we should give everybody, if everybody had a guaranteed, minimum income, then we wouldn't be worried about this because they could buy their own cars. That's not, who's going to pay, in the end, who's going to pay for that?
Yeah, there are a lot of utopias out there. I think this deals with until we get to one of those. And it has a lot of what I call ands. It does this and does that and does that and does that. And if in fact, we really focus on the real need, then when we do that, then hey, again, the equity thing says, hey, bring everybody else along too. I mean, it's not that we have to do more. That's kind of the beauty of this thing. It almost seems to, Elizabeth says, where's this snake oil you're trying to sell to people? It can't be all that good. But the amazing thing is that it's all there. It's all there. It's all there. We just have to do it. And I guess to that end, it was great to have Jeff Brandes from Florida. He said, in Florida, hey, you have this, you have insurance, enough insurance to cover, whatever fix up you may need to do in case something bad happens. I mean, unfortunately, nothing's perfect. And so you do have to have insurance to clean up a little mess that you might make. Come down here and do it. And I think, and it turns out New Jersey may not be that different from that. And so in a sense, we should just do it. And people like these, these companies, they're either very close or they can do it. Waymo and GM can come to Trenton and just do it.
Yeah,
Ford probably can too. Zoox may be able to too. Mobility isn't all that far. Well, come on, let's do it. Again, the reason for the attendance in the vehicles in New Jersey is because that deals with the sociology of this thing. Those of us that have been dealing with the technology, oh my goodness, I mean, we've been to Disneyland, we can ride, I mean, of course. But the customers, they haven't. They have to become acclimated. We have to fit this thing in properly into society, so it's accepted and not rejected. We can't assume that from the get-go that people are, oh, geez, Michael, Fred, and Alan are coming in here to save the day. I mean, they don't look at us that way.
How about this as an example of largesse when it comes to something that a large number of people believe to be an answer versus what we're discussing here. How much money has the federal government of the United States, Germany, Britain, France, Italy, I know Sweden, and certainly Norway, spent in giving money away to mostly people who are wealthy to buy an electric car? How much have they lost? How much have these governments lost in tax revenue by giving away essentially tax that they don't collect because someone has bought an electric car? I know how much it's worth here because I just bought a non-BEV, and the difference in the excise tax that I paid versus what I wouldn't have paid is something in the vicinity of $1,000. So here we're discussing how we can give money to people by letting them keep the money in their pocket, and by the same token being able to do something that they couldn't do before. If the bus solved the problem, we wouldn't be having this discussion. You know, if
Say that.
everybody,
Say it again, because it's what people don't realize.
if the
What
bus
is known.
solved the problem, we wouldn't be having this
We would have
discussion.
done it 50 years ago. We would have
Yeah.
done a long time ago. I mean, it's New Jersey Transit. New Jersey Transit is a great institution. It does a great thing.
Yeah.
But it's wanted to do this. It's supposedly provide mobility for everyone in New Jersey, and it's done it's done a darn good job.
Yeah, it has.
But it hasn't done this.
But it's not good enough.
But it really isn't good enough.
No, it isn't.
It
And
really isn't good.
buses
enough.
don't solve this problem. They don't solve the problem of people being able to get to where they need to go, who can't get there and don't have their own car. It's just, and then the other criticism is, well, if we just got rid of all the cars, then we'd have equality, because then everyone would have to take the bus. Everyone would have to take the subway. Everyone would have to take get on scooters and bicycles and everything else.
Yeah. If we took the elevators out of the Empire State Building, that everybody would have to walk up.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Guess how much rent you would collect from the 14th floor, from the people that use the 14th floor? Zero.
Yeah.
Nobody would get there. You wouldn't have built it. You don't have it. And there's discussions also, appropriately so, in the United States, it's great if you deal with mobility in cities or in the rural area. The sort of the middle, it assumes that you live in a suburb, you're a rich guy and you have your own car and you're taking care of yourself and you're actually the problem.
Yeah.
The rural, there's only these things could possibly provide mobility in rural areas. The diffusivity in time and space associated with the mobility requirements of that, there's no system that's functional, flexible enough that could come and meet the needs and demands out there. So your only hope to go to even low is this way. Now, it's not very pretty, because you don't have very high average vehicle occupancies, and people will say, oh my goodness, what's the energy consumption and blah blah blah, environmental impact of all those things. I mean, but those folks who live in the lower densely areas also deserve some mobility opportunities, besides having to deliver it only for themselves. Now, we might say, well, you shouldn't have moved out there. What are you doing living in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey? I think if you look at the income distribution of the folks that live in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey and in places like that in New Jersey, that distribution isn't very pretty. There are probably some very rich ones, but there are an awful lot of poor ones. And then if you look at where the mobile home communities are in New Jersey or in the nation, where have they been put? They're not next to, right next to Quaker Bridge Mall. They're not right next to Princeton University. They're in, low valued land someplace, and affordable housing. It's the only way you can find affordable housing. But the mobility that you need to support that affordable housing is expensive mobility at this point. Unless you provide some other means, you certainly can't provide bus service out there.
That's a good time, I think, to break here, Alan. We've made some great points about it. We also want to remind people with the dispatcher, there's lots more in there. In the new edition of the dispatcher, you're taking a look at the NHTSA report that we talked about in the previous podcast here. And there's another piece you take on The Economist and an article advocating congestion pricing for vehicles entering certain downtown areas, and that's a good piece too. They're all good.
Yeah, they're always all good.
As my readers know, over the last almost 9 years now, I come back to the issue of congestion charging, road tolls, call it what you will. And the Economist is, every now and then the same journalist comes back and starts talking about a transport problem, and his answer is always like the father on my big fat Greek wedding, which I say in the issue here. I don't know if you did either of you see the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding?
Yes, the answer is always Windex, right?
Yeah, his solution to everything. My brother-in-law, he's a great guy. He's a fireman, and firemen have the best philosophers I've known have been either baseball players or firemen, because the firemen get to sit around and talk a lot, and they were extremely well informed about everything, because everybody came with an idea, and they're always close to, one way or another, they're always close to politics, because at least in the United States, the fire chief is someone who's a political appointee. But he had one with Lysol. Somebody came in and said, we have to take your computers out of here because they've got a bug in them. They've been and he said, well, why don't we just spray them with Lysol and just take care of the problem?
The computer virus, right?
Yeah, and his solution was always Windex it'll cure everything, and it's like, if there's a problem with transport, whatever it is, congestion charging will solve the problem without thinking about what are the external effects. This is the Economist. I mean, these guys are supposed to be people who know how economics work. And for some reason, this is a real blind spot with them. They do not understand that not everybody who drives a car is rich. And if you're able to afford a car and you have a car for work, oftentimes, and I know this from people who have nannies living across the city of Washington, D.C. from them, if they don't have a car, they can't get to the 2 or 3 jobs that they have that start at 6 o'clock in the morning and end something like 10 o'clock in the evening, to be able to afford to pay the rent for their kids living in some place in Washington, D.C. And if you put tolls on them, it's just an added expense that ends up being, either they can't do the job, they can't take that extra job, they have to take the bus, they can't make it to the connections. And if something goes wrong, they end up losing their job. They don't understand this. The people in The Economist just don't get it. They must live in Mayfair, close to where The Economist is or was. I mean, it was on St. James Street, someplace. It's like, it's a complete blind spot on their part. So if there's an opportunity, I try to come back and at least put it in print one more time. Tolls are not fair. It's a regressive tax that does all the bad things. And this is directly related to what we're talking about here. If people are able to finally get a job and to be able to afford their own car so that they can do more things than just get from home to work, as they will hopefully be able to do with the proposal that's been put forward in Trenton Moves. And then you slap on top of them additional costs, more costs for fuel, more costs for traveling. And, at some point in time, it's just too much. And they can't afford it, and the car goes out the window, and well, not goes out the window, but the car goes back to the car lot, and you're stuck again. So, yeah, I have friends and acquaintances who will argue to the death on this same point, but I won't give in. Sorry.
So you're not a fan of Bill Vickery, huh? And and the great Nobel laureate and whatever, but Poor Bill. I think he passed away between the time that he was named Nobel laureate to before he could receive it. My goodness.
Okay.
And
well, I don't know Bill,
anyway,
and I don't know his points.
Anyway,
Yeah,
but
his thoughts on
in dealing with the congestion pricing, or I
Yeah.
always called it. I always thought, why do you call it congestion pricing? If you're favoring something, why do you give it such a bad name? Why don't you call it value pricing? I mean, if you call it value pricing, I mean, to me that has a positive connotation. Congestion pricing. Whenever when I say congestion pricing, my shoulders go in. Oh my goodness, I'm like defensive. Whereas value pricing, I'm providing you value through this thing. You might be able to sell it. It's the
same road. It's the same road. You don't get anything better. You don't get.
I understand. I'm just trying to sell it. If I was on the selling side of the concept, you're absolutely right. I mean, it implies that in fact you have such opportunities in your life to be able to change easily what you want to do. And a problem, and in all that stuff also is assumed some sort of continuum that exists in a neighborhood such that you can shift. But for many people, it's not a it's not the derivative is discontinuous. There's a jump discontinuity there. You really have to go there. It is really important to your life to go there. You don't have the flexibility to do what somebody else might do and say, oh my goodness. And then everybody wants to talk about these things as, of course, as some sort of nonlinear optimization program. And we get into all kinds of stuff when we talk about all that stuff and the math of it and whatever. And it just goes.
Yep.
Anyway.
We're sort of running through time, but I want to, one point that I do want to make is in the musings section, eyes on the backstory, the evolution of digital maps and advanced driver assistance systems. Hopefully on Tuesday I'll be able to give a talk, a 20th anniversary of the ADASIS Forum, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems Interface Specification, which was founded 20 years ago. Leading up to that, there was a group of people who were invited by then Navtech, Navigation Technologies, to discuss an idea of electronic horizon. Is it a good idea? We thought it was a good idea. We brought the idea to Ertico, and Ertico has managed the ADASIS forum ever since then. In this talk, what they asked me is to give my thoughts on what the future of digital maps and digital maps in the context of ADAS. And thinking about what I would say to this group, some of whom are probably still there from 20 years ago, but there are lots of new people who have come in. And knowing that the people who work in this are people who understand the technology, who really know digital maps, who know how to make maps a sensor in a vehicle. But my thought on this is, having started with the first time seeing a digital map was when I was at Princeton University, in my graduate years with the DIME files, which eventually led to the Tiger files. And those census data were used as the basis for a lot of the first digital maps that were used in navigation system. Yes, and thank you very much, U.S. government. But the backstory to that is that DIME files were set up to enable better definition of voting areas. That was the purpose of this. And so what I've done is I've divided this article into two parts. The first part is what I'm going to say to the group in Brussels, if I can get down there, because I may not be able to get down there because the pilots on the Brussels Air are not flying, have decided to go on strike. But the backside is a linear from 1970 until 2022 my thoughts on the backstories of each one of these developments, which the front story is GPS, the front story is digital maps, navigation systems, but there's a backstory. And taking that to what the message is, what's more important right now than technology, whether or not you've got a camera or LiDAR, is what's happening in the government. The government, both in the United States and in Europe, are beginning to think that it's their right and it's their purpose to determine what data people should be able to use and how people should be able to use it. In Europe, the new Data Act, and potentially the follow-on to that Data Act will be access to vehicle data. And in the United States, and I wrote about this with the Department of Justice and the Federal Trade Commission, deciding that companies like Google and Facebook and these large companies need to be broken up because they're not competitive. They inhibit competition. This is going to have an enormous impact on how data is given to vehicles and how data is coming out of vehicles. And in Europe, they're trying to define exactly how things will be happening in the vehicle. This will affect whether or not we have advanced driver assistance systems. One more thing, between the time I wrote this article and now it's going to press, I'll have to come back next time. The NHTSA has just released a report on data that they've collected from crashes that have been reported as a result of NHTSA a year ago, or almost a year ago, saying you have to give us information about whether your advanced driver assistance system has functioned or not functioned, and you have to tell us why. And they've gotten a lot of data, which is good, very good. That's happening. But at the same time, politicians are talking like, well, we need to get this under control. This industry, the car industry, is out of control. This is a quote, out of control. We need to get control in this. Giving instructions to NHTSA, to Stephen Cliff, the first guy that's been there for some time, who seems to know what he's doing and is going to try to do something well. These are the things that are going to have the greater impact, not whether someone comes up with LiDAR or someone comes up with a new way of managing an algorithm that will be better positioning. And these are the kinds of things that will have the most impact on how advanced driver assistance systems up to driverless vehicles will be able to be put on the roads. And this is going to affect Trenton Moves. It's going to affect what's going on with all of these companies that have billions of dollars invested in them, as well as all of the car companies today who are working very hard to make their cars safer by putting in driver assistance systems. So I just want to put it in a pitch for get to the end of the issue for those who read it, and spend a little time on that last article musings.
Terrific, Michael. Thank you. Now, we'll be back, but this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, we should point out that it's a good idea to read the white paper. It's called The Smart Transportation Revolution. You'll find it under the Insights and News tab. Some good information there to help you make informed decisions about investing. ETFs, as you may know, can be a good way to spread risk with investments, maybe focus on a particular category of stocks. That website again is motoetf.com. We are back with more of Smart Driving Cars and our guest, Michael Sena. Let's turn to some other headlines in the latest Smart Driving Cars newsletter, Alan. NHTSA has given approval to freight technology company Einride, I think they're from Sweden, to operate autonomous electric transport vehicles on U.S. public roads. These, I think, are pods on wheels, more or less, with remote operators monitoring them. What are your thoughts?
I was shocked. Okay, I was just shocked. I didn't know NHTSA could do that, but maybe they can. I didn't know that's all one needed to do to put a driverless vehicle out there, is to get NHTSA's approval. I'm just wondering how NHTSA approved it. Did they do some tests on it? Did they check to see whether or not the darn thing works? I mean, I read that and I'm like sending emails all over the place. What am I having? The most senior moment that I've ever had? Did I miss the fine print?
Yeah. NHTSA has absolutely nothing to do with whether a car is driving, or a bus, or a truck, whatever is driving somewhere in where's the test going to be? Where are they
They didn't
providing the
say
test?
anywhere.
They didn't say.
They
The
said public
implication
roads.
on public, it said
Public roads.
on public
Yeah.
roads. I mean, I'm waiting for it to come down Cleveland. I mean, you know what what we had to do, or what I thought we had to do to have to make sure that the May Mobility didn't get into trouble if they gave some rides, even with an attendant in their vehicle down a street in Princeton, which they did. I got the mayor to put 2 policemen, one in, but all I had to do is go to NHTSA, and NHTSA did that. And apparently GM Cruise has been out there trying to get the Federal Motor Vehicle Carrier, whatever, to approve them to put a vehicle out there without a steering wheel. And these guys, and remotely operated. But maybe, I guess, I don't know, maybe Brad Templeton. I should send Brad Templeton. Brad Templeton runs little pods down sidewalks, I think. I don't know. I'm looking for the smoke and mirrors, and hey, geez.
He's breathless. Look at
I'm breathless. I mean, I didn't realize how stupid I was, but I guess I'm stupid. Sorry, folks.
Moving along, Zoox co-founder and CTO Jesse Levinson is saying the company has completed what's called a critical checkpoint in robotaxi testing, with a vehicle, no human on board, operating on open private roads with pedestrians and other types of vehicles on the move on these private roads, I guess, to make it more like real world.
Well, yeah, I guess it is an achievement, but I guess, as I also put in there, it really isn't, because first of all, these folks should realize that there should be no testing being done without an attendant on board. Why? I mean, what? Who's going to be impressed by that? I mean, what you're impressed with is that you have no disengagements, or no necessary disengagements. Okay. I mean, all you have to do is show that the thing, that you had a person sitting there and they didn't do anything, and therefore the thing works. But you're going to do that by pulling the person out of there, and you're going to accept the risk associated with that. You're going to allow a vehicle to travel on a roadway in Arizona and not be worried if the attendant is just sitting there watching Hulu. That poor woman is being prosecuted, apparently. I think she's still being prosecuted for that. I mean, that's just total. At least it was done on a private road. No, who's going to be impressed by that? I don't know.
It shouldn't be allowed. It should just not be allowed.
Well, whether it's allowed or not allowed, I mean, the corporate responsibility, due diligence to the shareholders shouldn't allow that. Why? You're saving, you didn't have to pay somebody to do a test. The reason you take a driver out of a vehicle and do driverless is so you can provide high quality mobility affordably, to have a chance of being able to deliver it to people on infinitum without continuously asking for subsidy for it. If you have it, why do you need this technology if you have an attendant on board? If you can afford the attendant, do that. Don't pay for the LiDAR, schmidars, the high definition maps, who knows what, or any of that stuff. Provide the mobility out there. But we know that we can't do that because we haven't done it over the past 100 years when we could. And the only hope in providing the mobility, the only reason you do this is to try to get to a point in which this affordability issue, the opportunity to really do it and do high quality of it, is without a person. But that's on a deployment side. That's not on the testing side. If I'm testing, I didn't touch it. I didn't touch it. I didn't touch it. I didn't touch it. Tell me, Zoox, that you did that in Seattle, where you have vehicles operating for whatever, show me the graph that shows that exponentially going to zero or getting smaller without gaming the thing. And of course, we had VW game environmental, quality with respect to vehicles. We don't want to have companies gaming the system to show a better result with respect to safety. And so out there in your operational design domain that you're dealing with trying to provide mobility in Seattle, just sit there and report what the disengagements were. And I only want to know about the necessary disengagement. If there's a disengagement because the driver felt like, oh, I want to drive, or the driver intervened and really didn't need to be intervened because he or she freaked out and didn't need to freak out, and they were in error, those don't count. The system worked great. That's fine. But, to pull a driver, are you kidding me? In a test, are you kidding me? I don't know. Sorry.
A couple of other quick headlines, Alan. Cruise is now charging for vehicle rides with passengers in San Francisco, completely driverless. That's another step for them.
That's an enormous step. Providing mobility, a service out there in San Francisco for a charge. And I know, GM's rich. They can probably, subsidize the service for at least a little while. But darn it, if that thing doesn't have some economic legs underneath it, it's not going to survive. And that's the reason why GM Cruise took the driver out. Not to say, oh, look, Mom, no hands, or for some Sunday supplement, or some, clickbait someplace. I think.
And finally, the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, said this month that revenue from connected vehicle services will net the company $20 billion a year by 2030. And the numbers get even bigger with the new Ford Pro commercial business. And I don't think you're surprised by this.
No, I mean, we've been saying it's from the beginning. We had three kinds of vehicles. We have safe driving vehicles, self-driving vehicles, and driverless vehicles. The safe driving vehicles had everything to do about safety. The self-driving had everything to do about comfort and convenience. And we've argued in this thing from day one. How do you sell cars? You put chrome and fins on them. I mean, that's what the madmen taught us. And this stuff is the chrome and fins. It'll sell cars. It apparently is.
Sorry.
No. Okay. No. It's not going to sell cars.
I don't. And I was when I read this, I said, I might expect this from the guy from Dyson who's the new guy from new CEO for Volvo, but I certainly wouldn't expect this from somebody who's been in the business for a while, unless somebody's pushing him to do this. I mean, two people, Jack Nasser and what's his name, Mrs. Cookies Fields,
Mrs. Fields, yeah.
Mark Fields. They both lost their jobs because they were pushing Ford into an area where Bill and company don't feel comfortable, and they didn't want to get into the telematics. And Jack Nasser said, the car is just going to be a telephone on wheels. And the next thing they did was put some wheels on him and pushed him out the door. Mark Fields basically said the same thing. And the next thing he knew, he had, the guy with the sweater, taking over his job. And, he's doing something else. In the last issue, I talked about Mercedes and BMW. After all of the efforts that they've been making to be in the mobility as a service business, one after the other, they closed them down, they merged them individually, and then they finally, the two companies, merged their businesses into one, run by Mercedes and BMW together, and now they've just sold the whole shebang to Stellantis, and the last company that I can see, the Chrysler and Fiat, they were the last of the companies even to get into connected services, to be able to take this and do something with it. I don't think that a car company is going to be talking about earning billions of dollars in services if they don't sell cars. And the only thing that Ford has been doing is selling fewer and fewer cars. So I just don't know whether he was trying to pump the stock up or whatever he was trying to do. But that the guy on the West Coast now in Texas, who's passing, will soon pass Ford in the number of cars that they sell, Tesla, knows he's in the business of selling cars. That's what he does. And he goes to wherever he needs to go to build factories as quickly as he can, to build cars, to be able to sell cars. Yes, he does sell services. And yes, that is part of the business, but you don't sell those services unless you sell the cars. So, sorry.
Well, I agree with you about the selling of the cars, and I was talking more about the ADAS features instead of maybe the communications features, and and it seems as if they're coming in the cars and people are buying them. I don't know. It seems like some of those folks are having a pretty good success at adding those on, and of course they all look at Elon. Elon's like supposedly getting $12,000 out of people to. For full self-driving, and they must be wondering how in the heck is they doing that when they go in and buy the cars.
I'll tell you how he's doing it.
No,
it's the $12,000 that they didn't have to pay for the car.
Yeah,
because the government paid that part. Paid that part. I says, well, sure, I'll throw it in anyway because that's what I expected. No, I wasn't expecting it to get 12,000 back from the Norwegian government or the U.S. government or whatever government.
Yeah. So that's all in there. But I guess my other point was that I don't see these companies becoming the ultimate riding machine. I don't think anybody is saying that they're still the ultimate driving machine. Yeah. They're all the ultimate driving machine, and the driving piece of it and the individual ownership piece and this selling the stuff coming out of the showroom or whatever, whichever room you buy them, and that they're then your responsibility and you go maintain them and please bring it in and trade it in for the next model. I think it's still the fundamental business of the OEMs.
Yes, it is.
And it is, and it's not going to go away. And we love it. And we as consumers, I would say we love it because we're out there doing it. And even with all the complaints about it, some people go through. I mean, I think now leases are going up to like 7 years or something like that because interest rates went up or something like that. But you can still, for $229 a month, you can have. Now, who knows what the down payment is and what, I don't know. I haven't looked at them, but and we all do everything we can to afford them. Why? Because they provide us such a value proposition, so much freedom, so much opportunity that you know, we as individuals look at it, my goodness, I got to have one. Now, you know, it's just enormous. And you just look at us that have them, and you talk to some people who don't, their lives are substantially different. And it's not just because they live in the center of Manhattan. As Michael very clearly pointed out, those people living in the center of Manhattan, they have their cars stored in some basement. You know, actually, if you want to buy a good used car, you go to Manhattan Mercedes and get one that's just been turned in for 3 years. It has 2 miles on it. It's like a brand new car.
Yep.
Somebody's been storing it in a Manhattan high rise for 3 years. That's where you want to get your used car.
Well, thank you for the tip, Alan.
I am not being paid by I actually bought one there. I bought a 3-year-old car that had 10,000 miles on it.
Well, Michael, I really want to thank you for spending time with us again. Always terrific. Love your insights and throughout all of this. My
pleasure. I love being with you.
Yeah, well, we love discussing it. I think, look, this is not easy stuff. Okay. Because if it was easy, it would have been done. And there are a lot of very good people that have worked in this field for a very long time, and they're not bad people. It's just that we may have a couple of things available to us that we can really take advantage of. It might make a difference. So let's do it.
Great.
On that note, thank you to our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO, and more info is available at motoetf.com. Technical support is provided by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to safe and high-quality mobility for all. You can find us at smartdrivingcar.com, on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, wherever you get podcasts from. The smart speaker can play us too. You can find my tech reports at textination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alan Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching. Please continue to stay safe.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Michael.